Hi guys. So for this video, I'm going to be walking you through the design process for our very first design in our accordion booklet. So I have my booklet laid out here, and I just chose one side to work on. And I'll be making my first design in the very first square in the sequence here. And what I might do is while I design, just so that things are a little bit more secure and sturdy, I'm just gonna maybe lightly tape it with just a couple pieces of tape. You can do the same if you'd like to, if you're distracted by having the rest of the booklet there. Just kind of keep it on the edges here. That way this fold isn't in the way. And for my object of choice, remember that I asked you guys all to look around your house for an object to be the basis of your design. This is important because that's going to enable you to trace that object. You do not have to work freehand on this project at all if you don't want to. So my object of choice are scissors. And I chose this for a couple of reasons. First off, because my square is 7 by 7, and that's a decent size, I was able to choose a slightly larger object. If you're working within a smaller square, like you had to make your accordion book out of printer paper, then I would probably choose an object a little bit smaller than this so that you can fit the entirety of it within your design at some points if you want to. Another reason why I chose the scissors is I like it. I like this object because I can sometimes focus on the handle part, which has an interesting shape, and then also this part has like a completely different, like more of a pointy shape versus more of rounded shape, so I can like use both of those things at different times to really shake up my designs. I could even open the scissors and trace them that way to get a whole different look and feel in my design. So I like the versatility of the pair of scissors, and I like the general shapes that it has as well. So that is going to be the subject for my design. And for our very first design, now as we do these 4 designs, I am going to let you choose from the design principles here for each one. But for the first one, just the very first one, we're all going to focus on rhythm and movement together for the first design. And that's just going to enable me to be able to walk you through the process a little bit better, a little more clearly for the first design. And then once you move on to the second, third, and fourth, you will have free reign to choose whichever one of these design principles interests you to go forward with your other design. So you will have that freedom coming up, but for this one, we are going to stick with rhythm and movement all together for the first design. The definition that's listed here for rhythm and movement is the use of reoccurring elements to direct the eye through the image, just like this image is doing here. The way the elements are organized to lead the eye to the focal area. I would even take that one step further. I feel like that definition is a little bit limiting. And artwork that has a sense of movement and rhythm, and I will be showing you examples of this in the slide deck, different examples of designs with movement and rhythm in it, typically have a sense of energy to them, usually by use of repeating shapes, overlapping shapes, like rounded fluid forms, spiral shapes, zigzaggy shapes, things like that typically give a piece of artwork or a design a sense of movement or rhythm. So I will show you many more examples of rhythm and movement in design, but for this design, I want to focus on things like that to try to get a sense of movement and rhythm. And also, not just getting the sense of energy, but helping to lead the viewer's eye throughout the paper, like this definition says here. Okay, so just knowing the basic things that help give a design a sense of rhythm and movement, I'm going to start off by just like repeating this shape. So tracing this shape and repeating it several times. I think what I'm going to do is, because I know that fluid forms, rounded forms, circular type forms typically give a sense of rhythm and movement, I'm going to repeat this in an arc. Okay, so there are so many ways that you could do this. Again, you'll see lots of examples, so you do not have to just or I actually don't want you to just copy mine, but this is how I'm deciding that I'm going to give this first design a sense of rhythm and movement. So I'm going to start by tracing these forms here. And as I trace, I'm going to do it very, very lightly. This is my final accordion book, so as I tweak my design, as I want to change things, I want to be able to erase with ease and not have yucky eraser ghosts happening in my final project. And drawing lightly will enable me to erase as I want to adjust things. I might get this down on paper and decide it's really not what I want to do. Scrap it and start again, or erase one shape and add something different. So drawing lightly will enable me to do that. I think I'm gonna let these shapes overlap a little bit here. I always like it when things overlap. Also feel free to let your shapes go off the edges of the square. Typically better designs break the edges. Will break the edges of your square. Did I get that whole thing? Yeah. Just carefully trying to put it in place so it's lined up the same as that other one. Just gonna stop it at the edge right there so it doesn't go into my other design. Okay, so that's my design so far. So even just having those three overlapping and moving in an arc already gives it sort of a sense of rhythm and movement. So now I've got some other choices, right? I've got all this negative space up here. I want to break that up somehow. I could do a similar type thing going in an opposite direction across this corner. I could switch it up and use the actual blades of the scissors and overlap them in the background. I could even get, I have these stencils here. So if you have anything like stencils, definitely have a ruler handy, but anything like this to add extra shapes, any sort of stencils you might have would be helpful in this project. I could get a ruler and kind of break up my space using a straight edge like that. I could use the scissors themselves. So I've got to decide how I want to use the rest of this negative space. But as of now, I kind of like this arch. I think that this is going to give me the sense of movement and rhythm in my piece that I would like to have. I just have to figure out how to utilize the rest of the negative space. So as I was spending more time thinking about this, my first thought was to incorporate some circles into this, since it is about movement. And this particular stencil has a variety of different sized circles, and using different sizes, scale, which is one of our design principles, can also give a sense of movement and depth, right? Any larger circle will appear to be coming forward, any smaller circle would appear to be going back in space, which would also give a sense of movement, right? Like a deeper sense of movement. So that's a thought. And if you don't have a stencil like this, by the way, but you wanted to incorporate circles into your design, you could just find round things, like the end of a highlighter, or just looking at what I have around here. The cap of this paint tube I could trace and make a circle. This cup I could make a bigger circle. So be resourceful. Find things around your house to trace, even if you don't have like perfect supplies like this handy. There are lots of things around your house that you could trace. I think I'm going to use the circles for something else in another design, however, and I thought it might be cool if I had straight lines kind of like emanating out from this original design, which would help to break up this negative space, and it would also give it a sense of energy, almost like sunshine, kind of radiating out towards this center point. So that's what I'm going to try here. Again, I'm going to do this work lightly because as I get it down on the paper, I might decide I don't like it or I want to shift one of the lines over with ease. Yeah, see that one, I don't like where that one landed. So because I drew lightly, I can fix it. Better. So I'm just going from making a line from any corner that I can find. So corner down here, and then I think I'll make them come from these corners too. All right, so I decided to incorporate some circles in there as well, just because even once I broke up the negative space with my ruler lines, that space was broken up nicely with that, but it still had this feeling of imbalance because most of the action was happening down here. So throwing in a few circles just helped to balance out the image visually a little bit, I feel. So now what I have here is a good basis for design. Definitely has some rhythm and movement happening, right? It's got energy. My eye kind of flows throughout the piece nicely, pretty much dictated by this arch and these additional circles that help to balance things out. But I also have a lot of areas that are sort of confusing, like especially where things overlap and intersect. I've got a lot of that going on throughout. So now the decision I have to make is like, what parts do I want to keep overlapping like that, and which parts do I want to erase out so that the image is pared down a little bit, simplified, and cleaned up a little bit more. So this is what I came up with for pretty much getting ready for the next phase. Like I'm going to be ready now to do the next phase, which is hitting up all my lines with marker. But you can see I did a number of things here. First off, I decided I didn't really like where the lines, the ruler lines kind of intersected the circles, so I erased those overlapping lines out of there so that in some places the circles look like they're over. Actually, all of the circles look like they're over, like on top of the ruler lines. And then in some places the circles go behind the scissors, and in other places the circle goes in front of the scissors, which also gives, as I said before, the piece a little bit more of a sense of depth. Right, there are things that are clearly in the foreground and things that are set back more in the background. I did sort of like the design that the overlapping handles of the scissors made, but I also decided to erase away those lines to make this middle pair look like it was over or in front of these pairs. So just by simply erasing those overlapping or those intersecting lines within this space and this space, it made this pair look like it was in front of these two pairs, or these three pairs. Actually, I added another one here to break up that space as well and to continue the pattern. And then I decided that since this one was coming forward, I started to think about this one as kind of like my main player. And I added the scissor details, just freehand within the form, to create a sense of emphasis on this one figure. So you can see that by adding some other elements here, I'm starting to utilize some of the other design principles. And we talked about how really strong designs incorporate several of the design principles usually within them. So right in this one alone, we've got our rhythm and movement. We've got our sense of scale, because I've got some different circles going on. We've got emphasis, right? Because adding the details to this one emphasizes this pair of scissors more and creates a little bit of a focal point for the viewer. And then as I start to add color and things like that, I might employ things like contrast. I might decide that I want to really emphasize this one and make it a different color than the others. So a lot of these are going to come into play, even though our focus here is rhythm and movement. The more things you add, the more dynamic your design, the more of these principles you'll probably cover within each design. So for the next step in the design process, you are going to be going over all of your pencil lines with a marker. And there are some options here for things you could use that hopefully you can find around your house. The best scenario would be to have like a couple different size markers, one thicker, one thinner, so that you can get a variety of lines in your artwork. I'm going to probably use this Tombow that has like a brush side and a finer point, black. And then I'll probably use this super fine point. And then I also have this available if I wanted to. I probably won't use the thicker side unless I want to fill in anything solid black, but I might use the thinner tip of this. So these are the things I'm probably going to use, but the other good things to use are Sharpies, especially if you have like a dual tip one, or if you have a thicker one and a fine point. So you can get a couple of different line thicknesses in there. Also a black pen would work if that's all you have to go over your pencil lines with. A felt tip black pen is also kind of good to use as a fine liner. And if you don't have any of these things, even a black colored pencil, if you sharpen it up well, you can go over all your pencil lines. But once you get your design mapped out pretty much the way you want it to be, and you don't want to make any more changes to the layout or the composition of your design, you can now go over all your pencil lines with a marker so that it has a more finished feel. Now we're going to be adding color, and you're going to have a lot of different options for adding color and bringing this to the next level. But for now, we'll just make sure that all of our pencil lines are covered. Okay, so I think actually I'm going to use this thicker one to start outlining the scissors, because I think I want them to be a little bit more bold and stand out more. So anytime you have a thicker, heavier line, that will create emphasis on certain parts of your design. Doing this step very, very slowly, very carefully. We've done outlining with marker lots of times before in art, so you know to do this step carefully, because this is an important step in the overall, when it comes to the overall craftsmanship of your final project. It also can't be erased. It can't be undone. So you've got to do it really carefully. just thinking about contour lines a little bit. This is a design, so we don't have to be that crazy about contour line, but anytime you can have a variety of line is always a good thing, even in design. So I'm just thinking about doing these finer details with a thinner line versus a thicker line. I think I'm gonna do these other ones with a slightly thinner line too. Not rushing this step. Okay, and then next step, as always, just like we've done before in class, anytime we go over pencil lines with marker, unless we're doing that step in colored pencil, in which case you would not do this, but if you used any kind of marker or pen, give it a couple minutes to dry. Typically Sharpies dry fast and it's not an issue, but different kinds of markers or felt tip pens might take a little bit longer to dry, like maybe give it 5 minutes if you're not sure. And then when you are ready, just go through and pretty much erase up the whole thing so that all unwanted pencil lines are removed. And this will get it ready for the next step, which is to start thinking about adding color. So any smudges, any existing pencil lines poking through, there's always going to be some, no matter how careful you are with the marker. So doing this also carefully to make sure that I don't make a fold in my accordion book. So holding it securely on one side and just kind of dragging the eraser across. Some of these more stubborn lines, if you have a more aggressive eraser, you could try to really clean those up. You can see how if you drew really dark, this would be the point that you would find that to be frustrating, because you wouldn't be able to remove those lines as easily or at all. A couple little things I just want to fix up here. Just refine. the unevenness of the circle, so I think I'll just make it thick all around. And that's it. It's all set for the next step.